Hey, everybody. Welcome to Daniel Davis Deep Dive Mobile Edition. Yesterday, I was, or actually earlier today, I was in a hotel room, or maybe that was yesterday. I'm all topsy-turvy from all the traveling been going on. But right now, I'm on the way back to Washington, D.C. But when I heard that the news broke that there has been a hostage negotiation deal, ceasefire deal that's basically done, I thought it was important to go ahead and go on with this now as opposed to wait till tomorrow to give you the current situation as best we know it right now. So the general outlines, I'm going to tell you in just a second. I'm actually going to let the President of the United States tell about part of this for me. But I will tell you that as we get started here, what this shows is that the really the depravity and the horrible decisions that were made by both U.S. and Israeli governments, because the hostage deal that basically they have outlined now is the same one they could have had just a handful of months into this, and a whole lot less life lost for the Palestinians, and even less life lost for the Israelis. And unfortunately, they didn't want to do the right thing back then. And some of the other things that I had been warning about have come to pass. And I think that's probably part of the reason why this is happening. But first of all, here's President Biden telling about why he thinks, or what the general outlines of this deal are.
It's a very good afternoon because at long last, I can announce a ceasefire and a hostage deal has been reached between Israel and Hamas. The deal is structured in three phases. Phase one will last 6 weeks. It includes a full and complete ceasefire, withdrawal of Israeli forces from all the populated areas of Gaza, and the release of a number of hostages held by Hamas, including women and elderly and the wounded. And I'm proud to say Americans will be part of that hostage release in phase one as well. Israel will negotiate the necessary arrangements to get phase two, which is a permanent end of the war. Let me say it again, a permanent end of the war. There are a number of details to negotiate to move from phase one to phase two, but the plan says if negotiations take longer than 6 weeks, the ceasefire will continue as long as the negotiations continue.
So the bottom line is that one of the big sticking points for these Hamas side was the fact that the Israelis wanted to have a ceasefire, but they wanted to keep their troops inside the Gaza Strip. And that was a big sticking point for them. They finally said, no, we're not going to do that. What has not been released now so far is how many hostages, I'm sorry, how many prisoners, although some call them hostages as well, that the Israelis were holding that they were going to give back in order to get these. I think the number is actually 33. There's around 100 total hostages still being held in the Gaza Strip. It's not known how many of them are alive. There are probably quite a few that are no longer alive, but we don't know for sure how many. But apparently in this first round, there's going to be 33 that are released. And the only thing that's been publicly announced so far is that, quote, several hundred Palestinian prisoners are going to be returned as well. And listen, this is something I've been saying really since this war broke out, that a hostage deal could have been had at any time. And I said, listen, even if Israel had to give 5-1, 6-1, 10-1 prisoners back, what are they going to do? They're going to go into the Gaza Strip where they're still prisoners. And if that's the price it took to get the people back, then that's a very small price. In fact, I would even go so far as to argue it was cost-free for the Israeli side. But they didn't want to do it at that time and any of the times that it came up before. And of course, the Tony Blinken and the Benjamin Netanyahu and several others on both governments continue to say, well, it's all Hamas's fault. We were ready to do it. But I think it was very clear, and we talked about this many times, that it was not just the Hamas. I'm sure that they were problematic in many ways, but they were the real sticking point was what the Israelis were willing to do because they had the power to do it or to not make it happen. Well, it finally has happened now. And they said it's going to be a complete ceasefire. It's going to take, what is the number? 6 weeks for them to have a negotiation before they move to so-called phase two. And phase three, I'm not sure they haven't seen the details yet about what that's supposed to be, but phase two is supposed to be the peace talks, or the permanent peace rather, not just talks, but the permanent peace. We'll see how that works out. We'll see if this phase one drags into a long time. Remember, the Korean War, the armistice that was signed in 1953 was supposed to just be while they worked out the peace agreement. And, here we are now, 60 something years later, and that's still undone. So we'll see if that one works out as well. I'll tell you, it's going to be a very, very heavy lift because that's going to require the Israelis to do things that they have not been willing to do for, well, since 1947. But we'll leave that for another day. Anything, let me just say categorically, anything that ends the killing of the Palestinian people so that neither Israeli soldiers have to die or any Palestinians have to die is a very, very good thing. So even though there's a uphill battle to come, the killing will have stopped as a Sunday. And when these things happen, I don't know why they want to wait then, because that means that Israel will continue to attack and continue to kill people between now and Sunday. And can you just imagine how egregious that's going to be for any of the Palestinian people who get killed in these subsequent blasts? And apparently 62 were killed in just the last 24 hours alone. That's just going to be an egregious thing, and there's no value to it. There's no value to waiting till Sunday. Wait now. Just stop pulling the lanyard, stop launching the missiles, stop sending the airstrikes. There's nothing to gain by it. You'll just simply kill more people, and in the end gain nothing. And that will actually make it even worse, in my view, to the already uphill climb. In terms of who gets the credit for this, interesting that President Biden seemed to try and want to preempt that question by laying out that it's really mostly because of me.
This deal was developed and negotiated under my administration, but its terms will be implemented, for the most part, by the next administration. In these past few days, we've been speaking as one team. This has been time of real turmoil in the Middle East. But as I prepare to leave office, our friends are strong, our enemies are weak, and there's a genuine opportunities for a new future. In Lebanon, there's an opportunity for a future, free from the grip of Hezbollah. In Syria, a future free from the tyranny of Assad. And for the Palestinian people, a credible pathway to a state of their own. And for the region, a future of normalization, integration of Israel and all its Arab neighbors, including Saudi Arabia.
Okay, his comments there really illustrate why we were not able to get a ceasefire before and why this administration was pursuing policies totally disconnected from reality. I mean, he wants to tell you right there that I did this, we did this, my administration, and then the other administration will put it into effect, but it was really me that did it. And no idea that why this didn't happen until just a week before you leave power. There might have been some reason why you couldn't get it done at any time before then, because we were feckless. We didn't use any of the leverage we had, which I've talked about this for months. He had plenty of leverage. There's plenty of things he could have done. Biden didn't do any of them. And so now then here comes Trump, and one of his special envoys, I think his name is Witkoff, apparently was using some significant strong arm tactics and techniques on the Israeli side. And apparently that's what got the thing broken through. But look, just a couple of things that Biden said in there, actually three of them that we want to talk about here for a second, because it's so important. He says, because of this, now peace can reign in the Middle East. He said, the people in Lebanon will be free from Hezbollah. Who's free from Hezbollah? There's a ceasefire that happened up there. Hezbollah is still there. Nobody eliminated Hezbollah. They're still on the ground. They're still possible. And they're still licking their wounds from the significant damage they took from the Israelis from the top all the way down to the bottom. But they are still very much involved in what's going on. And they still are very much alive and on the ground, and something will have to be figured out there too. This issue here is just with Hamas, but you still have to deal with Hezbollah. That still has to take place, and it hasn't so far. So nothing's been resolved with that. The other thing is, he said, the people of Syria, they're now free of Assad. Well, yeah, but free from Assad into what? Remember, when Muammar Gaddafi was killed by the Obama administration in concert with some other nations, what did that do? There were all these celebrations. Everybody was cheering for a long time. And you remember Secretary of State Hillary Clinton at the time said, we saw, Gaddafi died, ha, 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 and laughed, etc. What happened after that? Basically, it sparked a civil war that still rages to this day. And the quality of life for the people in the region was terrible. So there is a long, long way from going on to that. And even in this situation here with the Hamas, but still, what's going to happen with that? What's going to happen with the West Bank? Because I think one of the reasons why this actually happened now is, aside from the Trump pressure, is because, and this is ironic, because just 2 days ago, Secretary of State Blinken, of all people, admitted that, well, what we've kind of discussed is that the replacement that all the casualties and the battlefield losses that Hamas has suffered, they've almost all been replaced. So they're basically back to the same strength they were when they started. And that's another thing I've been talking about since literally the beginning. You may recall every time I've talked about this practically, and certainly in the first part, I said that the path that Netanyahu's on is militarily unattainable. You can kill a whole bunch of people, but every time you kill somebody who's innocent, you give motivation, incentive for the other guy to come in. Even if they had killed every Hezbollah person that existed on the 7th of October, 2023, so many more people will be looking to get back in and to join it because that's the only thing they can do. And now then we have Blinken actually admitting that. I'm really surprised that he did, but that says it on the end. So basically, all the effort that Israel has been doing has been for nothing because they still have the same problem that they had before. So they didn't bring themselves any peace. They did lose a lot of troops. I think somewhere around 400 killed in action and some number of thousands wounded. I'm not even sure that the total number has been released yet, but it's apparently in the thousands. And now then that threat still exists. So now they have to do a ceasefire that they did in Lebanon, now then here in the Hamas, so that they can try to figure out what's going on. And they're going to have to rebuild their own strength because of all the losses that they've taken. And of course, the conditions that led to this, the 10-7 in itself has to be addressed so that doesn't happen again. And as I pointed out, it's now infinitely worse than it was before. And this is far, far from over. And in fact, even the ceasefire deal is far from over, as I'm going to talk about in just a second. But first of all, here's an interesting statement from Qatar, who is one of the key interlocutors that helped bring this together. Note who the Prime Minister of Qatar thanks in his declaration.
At the outset, I would like to extend appreciation to our partners in Egypt, the United States, namely the U.S.-elect envoy, Mr. Steve Witkoff, and the Middle East and Northeast coordinator, in Mr. Brett McGurk, for their extensive effort that have yielded in a breakthrough in these negotiations reaching up to this deal.
Okay, so you see there that he actually thanked the president-elect's envoy, Steve Witkoff. And then he did mention Brett McGurk, who I think is associated with the Biden team, but he didn't say anything about the Biden administration. And I think one of the reasons is because he saw that the Qataris saw many times that the Biden administration was basically helpless and pointless and powerless before the Netanyahu government. And it was always Netanyahu that was strong-armed in the United States and not the other way around. And now here comes Trump in. And apparently, at least according to initial reports, Witkoff went over there and strong-armed Netanyahu and told him in no uncertain terms that this deal will be done and it'll be done before 20 January, because that's one of the things Trump had been promising. And now then we see it's mostly happened, although at the last reporting I saw just before coming on air, Netanyahu did not confirm that this is the deal, and they have to have a cabinet vote on it tomorrow, which is important. But interesting talk about who gets credit for what. At the end of that press conference that Biden gave, I showed you a couple of scenes from a second ago. As he was walking off, somebody asked him, who should get credit for this?
Thank you.
Who takes credit for this, Mr. President, you or Trump?
Is that a joke? Oh, thank you.
Well, no, it's apparently not a joke. And look, that's just part of the outgoing administration. One of their big problems that he actually does think that it was him. But all of this process and all the things they've been doing, how many times did you see reports that the White House said that, we want an unconditional ceasefire and an immediate ceasefire? We should do it immediately and all this, and it never happened until after Trump's envoy Witkoff went into the area. And then it happened within 48 hours. And so when Trump is asked, or when he was asked there, he didn't want to give Trump any credit at all. He just said, is it a joke? And, no, it's not a joke. And for his part, Trump posted on Truth Social, he gave his version of what happened. Gary will have that up on the screen there. He said, this epic ceasefire agreement could have only happened as a result of our historic victory in November, as a signal to the entire world that my administration would seek peace and negotiate deals to ensure the safety of all Americans and our allies. I'm thrilled that America and Israeli hostages will be returning home to be reunited with their families and loved ones. And listen, I think that there's some truth to that. That Trump, likes to brag about doing a lot of stuff, but I mean, it's hard to dispute this one because until he got involved and his person got involved, nothing at all happened. And that's, kind of Biden's right in one sense. It's going to be the Trump administration to figure out what happens next. But look, there's still some problems on the Israeli side. For example, look, Gaza has been turned into rubble. Okay, you got a ceasefire, that's cool, but now what? Because we're 2.1 million people used to live in squalor and in low living conditions. Now then, it's just moonscape, and there's tents around everywhere, and I think less than I've seen a number somewhere around 100,000, 200,000 of those homes are still livable. So what are you going to do with all those people now? I mean, you can be happy, and they're celebrating right now for sure. I think I've seen some scenes already of the jubilation, and who's to blame them for that? But folks, that's going to run out pretty quick because now then they're going to stop and look around and go, wait, what do we have here? And and as these negotiations drag on, you can't just leave 2 million people trapped in an area and then not offer them any kind of a hope. And Biden, that was the other thing he said in that previous comment that, now it's going to give the people of Palestine a legitimate hope for a homeland and a state of their own. Well, that's fantasy because that's something that Israel has been categorically against. Netanyahu has been categorically against throughout this whole war that's been waged since 10/7/23. Biden keeps saying it, and Netanyahu keeps contradicting it. Now, what Trump is going to do when he comes in remains to be seen. I think he's limited in how much political capital he's going to expend on this. But if that doesn't get resolved, whether he wants to or not, I mean, you're going to have more terrorism. You're going to have another 10/7 kind of deal because the pressures will be even higher going forward than they were in 2023. And that's something that they're going to have to deal with. But they also got some internal issues here because the deal has basically uh, has been blocked, not just in the White House, but also from the Israeli side. We had their one of the cabinet members, Ben Gvir, who publicly today boasted that most of those times that there weren't ceasefires that I just mentioned were because he helped to kill the deal. You had the U.S., as some officials have privately admitted, that the July deal, when that was trying to get done, was killed by Netanyahu, i.e., Biden allowed it to happen because he was powerless to stop it. And now Ben Gvir is saying, listen, me and my colleague Smotrich, who's also a very far right wing member of the war cabinet for Netanyahu, he said that Ben Gvir is publicly saying, "Hey, let's get together." So at tomorrow's meeting, when the cabinet has to vote on this ceasefire, he says they're both going to vote no, and that they want to leave the government and potentially bring it to an end. So Netanyahu's got some internal issues to worry about because are enough people upset about this? And Ben Gvir especially has just been just beside himself on railing against this and saying, no, we don't want a ceasefire. We're going to continue to fight. We want to continue to defeat, even though he has more knowledge even than Secretary of State Blinken does, that there is no military solution. But these people, the Ben Gvir tops, they just are obsessed with continuing to try and kill their way out of this. And I think that if left unchecked, they would probably eventually try and kill everybody in the Gaza Strip or expel them out of the country. But I think those days are over. But it's going to be a real challenge for Netanyahu because Netanyahu's got some legal issues to face as well as some political ones. And if this war comes to an end and it stays at an end, then by all accounts, his political career will be over shortly after that. He's stayed in power, I think, up to this point because he's been widely despised inside Israel politically. They have stayed behind him so far because they viewed it as, he was the military leader. But once that's taken care of, I think there's a significant chance that he will be deposed from power, and then he'll have the very real risk because of his legal issues will then take back center stage again, possibly even getting put in jail. And I think that's got to animate what he's going to do. And then that's going to also animate whatever happens to who comes in next, because it's not like there's a whole lot of doves on the Israeli side that are just waiting to get back in and then things can change. So Israel's going to have a big, big issue for a long time because of the policies they've been taking, the way they responded to 10/7. Now then, they've built for themselves a very, very high mountain of trouble that's going to take a long, long time to get rid of and to resolve. And if they're still unwilling to do anything at all to the Palestinian people to give them a future and a hope, as again I've been saying from the outset, until that happens, then there's not going to be any security for Israel. There's not going to be security for the Palestinians. That has to change if they're going to do anything positive from here. That's the story from Fort Myers, Florida. I will be back in our regular studios tomorrow in Washington, D.C., and we're going to have Colonel Douglas McGregor at 1 p.m. And Alex Mercurius, I believe, is next up on the list. It's going to be a great day tomorrow. You're not going to want to miss that. Lots of stuff to talk about tomorrow. Two of our most popular and favorite guests are going to be on. So I'll see you on the next episode of Daniel Davis Deep Dive.